I know you've enjoyed talking to each other. All right, we're going to move on to our last session. Now, I want to ask you at your tables, did you have good discussions? Yeah. Did you feel a little bit like me and the Texas Tech guy on the underground? Did you feel like you were connecting with fellow travelers, right? Yeah, so amazing. I hate to cut off your discussions, but we're going to try to stay on track for time. I know it's my fault because I can't ever stay in my time limit, but we're going to try to get there. Okay. So if you didn't get to all the questions, great. Those are great for your personal Bible study at home. At the very back of your packet, I also just included one that's just for home. It's just a follow-up session, study that you can do on your own as you're processing what we talked about today later in the comfort of your own home. So the next thing that we're going to talk about before we have lunch here is that because our lives have been transformed by a vision of heaven, we can have joy in our lives, ladies. No matter what, we can have joy in our lives because we have been transformed. I titled this one, Because of Heaven, Joy is a Choice. I'm going to qualify that, okay? So I believe that joy is a gift. And it's a gift of the Spirit. It's fruit of the Spirit, right? In our lives, it's a gift from God. But we have to position ourselves to receive the joy that God gives us. So God will give you joy in your life, but you have to be in the right place to get it, right? Have you ever been to one of those events where they give door prizes or something, but you have to be in the room to get it, right? So you have to be in the right spot to get the joy that God wants to give to you today. So I want you to walk out of here today going, wow, I can have joy every moment of every day because I am a citizen of the kingdom of heaven, no matter what happens. I understand. When we start this journey, I just want to say, I understand that many of you in this room have had a lot of very, very difficult things happen in your life. But we're going to talk about how because of heaven, we still can experience joy. I'm not talking about happiness. I'm talking about joy, right? All right. So I'm going to start with a story. I told you about that little kids class I did down that little alley walkway. Okay. So one summer, we only lived in that city for about a year, a little bit over a year. But while we were there, I started this children's class, and we were having like 20, I think we had like close to 30 kids in this little room. It was babies through 18. That was my Bible class. So, and so we were going to have American missionaries were going to visit, and there was going to be a gospel meeting, So there was this big marriage hall. So in the town, in the little suburb, there was a marriage hall, but people got married in. And so basically it was 3 levels. So there was a big hall, kind of like this, but maybe a little bit bigger. And then around it was a balcony that just kind of went around in a U. And so there was space. And then there was, like the little metal railing with slats and then the metal on the top. And then below, there was another room the same size, and so they would have the wedding in the top, and then there was a kitchen downstairs, and they would have, afterwards the meal for everybody downstairs. So we had the bright idea. I was like, okay, let's have a little VBS during the. So we're going to invite all the kids, right? So I had my little group of kids. I guess there were probably about maybe 20 regulars in my little group. And so I said, hey, invite your friends because we're going to have. I know, you know what's coming with this story. So I said, invite your friends. And so I thought, maybe we'll have 50. I don't know. Maybe we'll have 50. And so the night came, the first night. And I was going to do it, and then there was a lady in the church that translated for me for Bible class, so she was going to translate. She knew English, so she was going to translate for me. And there was another missionary wife that was just going to be there that didn't speak English. So there was basically two of us, that didn't speak Spanish. So didn't speak, that would have been Malayalam maybe, or no, that would have been Marathi. So anyway, the kids there spoke Marathi. So we were, no, they wouldn't have. They would have spoken Kannada, but that doesn't matter to you. So I'm just going back and thinking, which language did they actually speak in that place? There are a lot of languages in India. So anyway, there were two of us that didn't speak the language, and there was one that did. The night, we're all excited, we're there, and so people start pouring in, and the kids just start pouring in, and we are laughing. So there's a word in the language that was punge punge. Punge means more. And so we were laughing, and we were like, punge punge children, punge punge. And they just kept coming. And so they had a map for them. And so we ended up with probably almost 200 kids that night. And so this is when they started coming. Somebody took a picture. So they just kept coming and coming. And so we were just like, oh my. And so they started the meeting, and then they said all the kids can go downstairs. So all these kids jump up and run downstairs. So we go down after them, and I have never been so tired in my life, because we were just talking so loud. They were translating, and they were all sitting, but they were all talking to each other, and they were just like, it was a long ride that night. And so we were just like almost hoarse at the end of it. And then at our meetings, we had an old film projector that we carried around with us, because it was before the internet, and people didn't get to watch movies and do stuff there very often. And so we had these Jesus films. You know how they used to have the Jesus films that went right along with one of the Gospels? So we always showed Jesus films. And so we were going to have a Jesus film at the end. So at the end, the visiting American missionary came down the stairs, and he just said, "It's time for the film." And I'm not kidding, it was like the wave. And so it started in the back, and all the kids went, "Film, film, film, film!" And they started screaming, and then they just all stood up. And we were like, oh my goodness, we don't know what to do with this. So he's in the middle. So the staircase kind of bends. And so he's against the wall in the middle saying, "Stop, stop." And the kids are just like running, screaming. And then they all didn't stop at the top. They went up to the balcony. And so they all lined the balcony all the way around, and they stuck their little legs out between the things. So they were yelling, and there was these little legs all over the place. So all the adults were down. And I couldn't make this up if I had to. That moment, so in India, monsoon is a huge thing. So the summer is like March, April, May. It just gets hotter and hotter and hotter, and there's no rain, and they start even doing more electricity shedding than they usually do, so you have at least one full day that you don't have electricity, and it just builds up. We're running out of water and everything. And then when the monsoon hits, because then you get like 2 months of rain every day, torrential rain, and so everybody's waiting for it. That night, I'm not kidding, in the middle of that, after the kids came up, the first monsoon rain hit like a downpour, and the top of the roof had like corrugated metal on it, and it was just like beating, and the kids were laughing, and the parents got up and they were laughing, and the Jesus film was going, and my husband was like, "Just cut the film, we are done." So everybody went out. So that night, we had great plans for that night. Everything was messed up that night. But at the end of a night like that, you have two choices. You can sit down and cry, which you kind of feel like doing, or you laugh. I have never laughed so hard. I cannot remember a time when I laughed so hard. On the way back with the other missionary wife, I think we were riding in an auto rickshaw, and we laughed so hard. I got home and my face just hurt because we were laughing so hard. And I think that's a great example. Isn't that the way life is? Sometimes our very best plans just go by the wayside, and sometimes in a much more tragic way than that. But we have a choice. The point is, we always have a choice. We can choose positive or negative, light or dark, death or life. We have a choice in every situation in our life. How are we going to look at it? I am telling you, if you know you are a citizen of heaven, it's going to change your choice, and you're going to be able to choose to accept joy. That story of Paul and Silas, remember? They were in prison, and they had been beaten. And this was not an easy situation. This was not a joyful time. I can't even imagine going through that. What were they doing in the jail? They were singing. They chose joy, didn't they? And what was the result of that? New citizens of the kingdom of heaven, right? The jailer and his family were like, what are these people doing? They are singing in prison. Why would they do that? They end up, God intervenes. He sends the earthquake. All of that whole story comes in a very difficult time when two men, two citizens of the kingdom of heaven, decided to position themselves for joy. They took the road to joy, right? And it had big impact in the lives of those that they were with. We have that choice every day. If you read in Philippians chapter 1, Paul is talking in that section about how, that's when he says, I don't know, it'd be better to go on to heaven, but I know it'd be better for you if I live here. So either way is okay. Either way is okay. And I'll probably get stuck here with you guys, and that's good too, right? He's like, if to live is Christ and to die is gain. That's a citizen of the kingdom of heaven, right? You can deport me and it's going to be fine because I'm going home, right? To live is Christ because I'm a citizen of the kingdom of heaven, and to die is gain. It's the icing on the cake, right? And so that's how we live our lives if we're positioning ourselves for joy. So I want to talk about what happens in our lives. So I'm going to talk about two different kinds of dams. And so sometimes you'll see a river going through, and when you think of the word dam as something that blocks water, and you sometimes it might come to your mind kind of like a dam built of stones, kind of like, for those of us who are older, that old story of the Dutch boy who put his finger in the dam, that kind of stuff. So that picture is usually like stones, or sometimes it just naturally happens and the stones build up and it creates a dam, and the water can't get past it because there's a bunch of individual stones. Years and years ago, we went and saw Hungry Horse Dam in Montana. I don't know if any of you have seen Hungry Horse Dam, but yeah. So Hungry Horse Dam is just like one huge concrete piece, right, that they built. And you can see how much water that dam is holding back. It's a ton of water, right? So I'm going to tell you, ladies, that joy is like the river. So I want you to think about the river being joy. God is sending His Spirit and His joy into our lives, and it's flowing through our lives. And sometimes that joy gets blocked by a lot of individual things, and they just pile up. A frustration over this, something happening at work. Oh, my child is not following my directions. This friend is doing, so they're individual stones. And they group together, and if you're not careful, before long, the joy can't get through anymore because you've let them build up. You're holding on to them, and you let them build up and become a dam that stops the flow of joy in your life. And then sometimes there's just like one big piece that just comes down in your life. Maybe your spouse passes away. Maybe your child passes away. Maybe it's a diagnosis you didn't want. Maybe your child is estranged from you. It could be so many different things, but that's different, isn't it? It's like the flow is happening and then, boom, there's no way it can get past anymore. And there's that one big thing. And so what I'm telling you, though, as a citizen of the kingdom of heaven, God has a way around that, right? He wants you to have joy no matter what's blocking the joy in your life. And so if it's individual stones, we have to learn to put those stones back on the bank or in the bottom of the river and don't let them pile up, right? We have to look through our spiritual eyes and see what's actually happening. And if it's the big dam that comes down in one big piece, if you look really closely, do you know what's down here? Do you know what those are called? Sluice gates. Have you ever heard that before? A sluice gate, they're built into the dam, and they can open the sluice gate and let some water out, right? And let the water flow on through. What I'm telling you today is no matter what seems to be blocking the joy in your life, God has a way around it. And He has a way to ensure that His joy flows in your life. So we're going to talk about that. His joy, He can give it to you. But you have to get in the right place to receive it, right? So we're going to talk about how you do that right now. So how can a correct view of heaven help me choose joy? That's the question for us today. And I'm going to give you some ways that that can happen. Number one is that I have to realize, so again, we have to get our mind in the right place, right? For God to bless us with joy, the gift of joy. And so what I have to realize is that I may not always understand how, but God is always at work for our good in the advancement of His kingdom in this foreign world that we live in. God is always at work. Romans 8:28. You guys all know that one, right? God works for the good. He's always working for the good of those who love Him and are called according to His purpose. He's putting all the pieces together in a positive way, even when we can't see it. 1 Peter 1, verse 6 through 9 talks about how we are being refined. Our faith is being refined like gold. So the refining process in gold. So when you find gold in the ground, you know what? It's not pure. It's never pure. It's got other stuff in it. And so what they have to do when they find gold is they heat it up. And what happens when you heat gold is the impurities come to the top of the gold. And I heard one time someone talking about this, and they said the goldsmith, it'd be like they'd have, especially in olden times, they'd have the big gold in a big pot that they're heating up, and then the impurities would rise, and they would skim the impurities off. And they'd heat it again, skim the impurities off, heat it again, skim the impurities off. And it's said that when the goldsmith could look down over the pot of gold and see their own reflection reflected back to them, the gold was pure. What does that make you think of in our lives? God uses the things that happen to us to purify us. And I don't know about you, but when the heat goes up, my impurities come to the top. Right? My impatience, sometimes I'm mean, and sometimes I'm just like, all these things that don't come out until you get tested, right? But God uses that testing process for that to come out so He can get rid of it. And He can swipe it away. And eventually, you know what the end product is? God looks over my heart and sees, himself in my heart. And so that's a really great outcome for really challenging situations. So if we keep that in our mind, it helps. I always think about childbirth. Oh my goodness, childbirth. Childbirth is a bloody, chaotic, loud, just a mess of a thing, isn't it? But at the end of that terribly difficult situation, what happens? They lay that little baby in your arms. I will never forget I'll never forget any of my children, but that very first child. And you look in their face and you go, oh my goodness, this is like a person that wasn't here before. How did this happen? It's such a miracle. And I love that picture because you can see joy. After my first one was born, the nurses were telling me, you got to stop crying because you're going to make yourself sick. And I wasn't crying because I was sad. I was crying because, it's just like the emotion of having that baby. And that's what our life is like, isn't it? God is creating new life through us, through the experiences of our life. He's creating new life. And it's a bloody, messy, chaotic experience. And it doesn't go the way you plan. And there's detours and there's twists. But at the end, oh my goodness, there's life at the end of that, right? If we can remember that picture. And then the last example that I have here is, I grew up in West Texas, and I fly a lot, and I'm telling you, planes don't take off in storms anymore, but they used to. They used to fly in storms. And I remember a long time ago, there was big old dark thunderclouds coming in, and we were leaving from Lubbock, Texas. And it was just like, it was getting night, and it was the middle of the afternoon, and it was dark, and and you look up at the sky, and you're like, ooh, that looks terrible. And then got in the plane, and I remember going through the clouds and breaking out on the top, and you know what? It didn't look anything like that on the top, did it? It was like so blinding bright white on the top that I couldn't even hardly look at it. And I think that's the way God sees our lives sometimes. We're looking up at what's happening to us, and it looks dark, and it looks scary, and it looks menacing, and God's looking down and saying, this is the most beautiful thing that could happen, right? It's the difference between our view and his view. And so, changing the way that we look at what's happening to us. If we say, you know what, I think I'm going to be refined through this. Maybe I'm going to look more like God at the end of it. Hallelujah. Don't you want to look more like God? I want to look just like Jesus Christ. And if that's going to help me, that's what I'm in for, even though it's terrible, right? There might be new life at the end, new life for someone else. Sometimes I experience things and I go through things so that God can bring new life into somebody else. Isn't that worth it? What mother wouldn't say that childbirth is worth it? My husband always laughs because whenever the second time I had a baby, I was like, I don't remember it hurting this bad. And he's like, yes, it did. Yes. You guys all just forget, and then you do it again, But what do you keep after that birth experience? You're a child. There was new life. So if something that I experience can bring new life to someone else, it's absolutely worth it. And then keeping in mind, I'm not seeing the whole picture. I don't see the whole clouds. God does, and I don't, right? In the 1 Corinthians passage there, that's the one that says there's always a way out whenever trials and temptations come our way. God always, and that's like there's always a way to move the rocks so that joy can come through. There's always a sluice gate there that God can open so that joy can continue in our lives if we position ourselves the right way. So we have to think about things correctly. So I may not always understand God's plan for good, but he always understands my pain, and he comforts me. When I lived in India, this picture over here, this is the only picture. There's no, back in the day, you didn't carry a phone around with you. So you go back to look through pictures and you're like, why didn't anybody take a picture of this? And most of the pictures I'm not even in because I was the one that had the camera all the time. But this woman in the middle, her name is Debbie Hooper. And she was also a missionary in India before me. And she and Mark became really close friends of ours. They visited us several times in India, but I couldn't wait when Debbie was coming. I just couldn't wait for her to get there because she was the one person who understood my life in India. She understood it all. We had so many great laughs when she was there, and we could share everything because she had been in India with me, right? And she understood what I was going through. So what I'm telling you is that God, what I'm going to tell you now is that God is that person for you. He understands what you're going through. He gave up his own son. Jesus Christ understands what you're going through because he came into our messy world and he did it with us, right? There's just, I don't know, have any of you ever heard Jim McGuigan speak or read anything by Jim McGuigan? Oh, just one of my all-time favorite. He was at Sunset a lot when I was growing up, and I love his stuff. And I love this thing that he wrote. This is in his book, Where the Spirit of the Lord Is. We come to God with our bundle of tragedy, our leukemic child or crippled husband, and we lay it before him, lip trembling, looking for an answer. What am I to make of this? Or if not for answers, at least some kind of assurance, something to help us make it through the awful days. Without even a hint of displeasure or disappointment, and without a word of explanation, God lays his own bundle of tragedy beside ours, our loved one and his loved one, our heartache and his, lying there side by side. And for all our heartache, there's something in that silent act of God that comforts our hearts and gives us courage. So without an explanation, but strengthened, we thank him and get back to the business of glorious living, knowing that this Lord works triumph and glory in and through tragedy as he did with his own. We have heart to believe what our intellect has the grounds for believing, that he can and is doing wonderful things with our sore trouble. So we make it our aim to proclaim the love of God for the whole world, fully aware of the tragic stories that poor, broken-hearted people are telling. But with a sympathy born of assurance rather than despair, we lay our own stories down beside theirs, and then God's story down beside ours, and we speak wisely and hopefully about the love of God for us all. Isn't that beautiful? We can be assured that as we travel in this world, that God understands and he's bringing something good from our tragedies. So our first point is that I'm going to realize that I may not always understand how, but God is always at work for our good and the advancement of his kingdom. Let's read it together, ladies. I realize that I belong in heaven and that all the events of my life are orchestrated and used by my Heavenly Father to bring me and as many around me as possible to share an eternity with him. Yeah. Number two, so first we're going to get our mind in the right place, and we're just going to say, God's at work. God is doing something here. I may know what it is, but he's doing something. Number two is I have to choose a positive outlook. And I'm sorry, we're just going to run out of time if I read them all, but write down Philippians 4:4-8. That's the whatever is lovely, whatever is kind, whatever is beautiful, all those things. Think about these things. We have to choose which way we're going to think. If we choose that, God will give us joy, right? We have to choose the right thing. So when I lived in India, I'm going to tell you about a really sad night in India for me. Edward was out in the village. He had gone on a trip, and he was preaching to some preachers. There's no way I could even get hold of him if I wanted to talk to him. Again, we didn't have cell phones back then. And India had very few telephones, and we didn't have a telephone in our house. So I'm there by myself with my 2 little boys. And I put them to bed, and my mother-in-law had sent me. I am just a John Denver. I've always been a John Denver fan. I used to have every single record. This will date me. Every single record that he had out. And she had sent me, he had done a concert thing that was recorded. And so she sent me a VHS tape. And I sat down and watched that after I put the boys down for bed. I watched that concert and I cried profusely. I mean, there was something about that music that was just home. And it was just like, it just broke my heart, and I just cried and cried and cried. But I had to make the decision not to stay there, right? I don't think I watched that one again because it was like, I don't think I need to go down that path, right? We have to choose what we're thinking about. Kathy, my mentor, one of the things she told me was when you're in India, if you look ground level, there's poverty, there's dirt, there's all kinds of stuff that can get you down. And if you're starting to feel like you're losing your joy, she said, look up. And when I look up, India is a tropical paradise. It's beautiful. And so right outside my window, so our house had actually 3 levels. It was like a old bungalow kind of house, and but our bedroom was on the 2nd level. And right outside the window, there was 2 Ashoka trees. They're like real tall, skinny trees, and then there was hibiscus just growing up into the Ashokas. So when I looked out my window, I always saw bright red hibiscus. And there's nothing that screams creative beauty like hibiscus flowers. And still when I see hibiscus flowers today, they just make me kind of happy. But if I focus on what's going on here, I might be discouraged, but if I look up and think, who gets to look out and see beautiful hibiscus? Maybe some of you live in places that's true, but I had never. This right here is this is the house across the street from us. And look at those flowers growing on their little wall. I mean, it was just beautiful. And that's good advice, isn't it? When you're in the middle of something that's really getting you down, look up. Look up to God. We take every thought captive for Jesus Christ. This one, I'm just going to read it. We may go over just a few minutes, but I'm going to read it because it's just too good not to read. 2 Corinthians 10. Starting in verse 3. For though we live as human beings, we do not wage war according to human standards. For the weapons of our warfare are not human weapons, but are made powerful by God for tearing down strongholds. We tear down arguments and every arrogant obstacle that is raised against the knowledge of God, and we take captive every thought to make it obey Christ. I love that. Don't you love that? It's like in the morning you wake up and you go to battle, and you're going to battle right here. And you're saying, I am not letting Satan rule here. I am a citizen of the kingdom of heaven. Jesus Christ is my Lord, and he is Lord of my mind. And I am going to give him every single thought, and I am going to think about how I think, right? I am going to think about how I think. I have one of my favorite little signs in my office says, don't believe everything you think. It's a good reminder. Don't just let thoughts come in without examining them. I'm telling you, all kinds of thoughts will come in. And just because they come into your head doesn't make it true. It does not make it true. We have to decide what we are going to think about and take every thought captive. Again, all these stories about my oldest son, my other kids said great things too. I don't know why. He's just one of the most amazing people I know, my oldest son. And I remember when he was little, and we lived in this is a picture of our house. And I'm telling you, it had a lot of space in it, but it was
it was kind of rough living, you know. The electricity was on the outside of the walls, like I said. We had in the bathroom, they had these things called geysers. Like, you don't have hot running water in your bathroom. So we pumped, we had a well that we shared. The house was actually a duplex. So there was people that lived on the front side and we lived on the back side. We shared a pump, a water pump. So there was a well, and every day we had to turn on the water pump. It would pump water to the top of our ceiling, and then it would come down through our pipes, but not hot water. So you had this little thing that's like a little baby hot water heater in your bathroom, and it had a switch on it. And so you could go turn, so if you wanted a hot shower, you had to go turn the geyser on. We always laugh because there was an old geyser in our bathroom, but you'd touch it and it'd heat up. Well, like I said, the electricity fluctuated, and so the switch was plastic. So every once in a while, like every couple of years, I wouldn't even look. I would just run in and hit that switch to get water, and the little thing on top, the switch would just break off, and my hand would hit, and I'd get a little, you know. So I remember one time that happened when I was pregnant with my daughter, and if we would have had Google, I would have been Googling what happens when you electrocute yourself and you're pregnant. I was so scared that I had just ruined her life, you know, because I had done that. So our house had a lot of challenges with it. At least one day a week, we didn't have electricity all day. It was really hot. It only had fans. If the electricity went off, then two things happened. You didn't get your fan, and then we had little electric mosquito things, little that kept the mosquitoes away. Well, it was like it burned a little square thing, and it made something that made the mosquitoes go. But that stopped. So if we lost electricity, you knew you were going to be just drenched in sweat, and we were reaching for the mosquito spray, you know, because everybody had. So our house was not that great. I mean, it was great. It was a great place, and it was a blessing. But I remember talking to my son one night before we were going to bed, and I was talking about heaven to him, and I said, and God is preparing a beautiful home for us in heaven. And he looked at me and he said, even better than this one? I was like, yes, but isn't that sweet? So he had a different view than me. He looks back. He was 6 when we came back. When he looks back, and it's just all rosy. India was like the most wonderful place he ever lived in his life. And it's a different way to look at the same thing, right? Kay Marshall Strom wrote this in one of her devotional books, and I love it. She says, I walked through the ashes of what had been our house, searching desperately for something I could keep. Somehow it seemed so important to have something from before. You might as well give up, my husband said. As I reluctantly walked back through the ruins toward the street, I stumbled over something in what had been the dining room. I stooped down, dug it out, held it up, and blew off the ashes, and it looked like an honest-to-goodness piece of modern sculpture. Its base was formed by a set of turkey-shaped salt and pepper shakers, forever molded beak to beak by the crystal globules that had melted over it. The turkeys had been a gift from my 6th grade teacher who had always had great faith in me and my potential. On top of the turkeys was a melted base of silver candlestick, a wedding gift to Larry and me. And to one side were the melted remains of my grandmother's milk glass sugar bowl, and on the other side was the delicate china teacup that I bought on her honeymoon. And balanced on one side was Lisa's baby spoon and fork, and on the other was Eric's long-handled baby feeding spoon. The entire piece was cemented together and glazed over with a sparkling layer of melted crystal. I knew immediately what it was. God had given me a brief summary of our family's life. It was my memorial stone. And in our new house, the memorial stone sits on a special shelf where it can be seen by everyone who enters. And when someone says, "What's that?" I immediately answered, "It's a memorial to God's goodness. Our house burned, but our home was preserved." Troubles and trials will come your way. Will you look at them as plain old pain in the neck troubles, or as a polishing that will transform you into a rare, beautiful stone? It's all about how we choose to look at it, right? That could have been a memorial to the greatest tragedy of my life, but that's not how she talks about it, right? It's how we choose to look at things. So, number 2, choose a positive outlook. Let's read it together, ladies. I choose to take focus off of me and onto the heavenly view of God's redeeming work in my world every day. So I'm going to take that back, the control over how I think about things. Number 3, how can we correct view of heaven help me choose joy? Reach out in service. That's going to position you to receive the joy of God. You have to serve others. It can't be about you. Stop thinking about yourself and get out there and do something for somebody else. That's the key to a joyful life. I've been reading a lot lately on the idea of cruciformity. So the word cruciform just means cross-shaped. So there's some really great material out there. If you're interested, Stan Key has written just an amazing book called Cross Purposes, keeping the cross at the middle of your life. And so your life is shaped by the cross of Jesus. Jesus was all about sacrifice and service. He came to serve, right? And so that's who we are. Before the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame. What was the joy set before him? You, us, all of us, right? It wasn't about him. It was about what he could do for our lives. So he endured difficult things for us. And we get to do that too. Colossians 1:24 says that we fill up the sufferings of Jesus Christ. Jesus didn't suffer enough. He suffered enough for salvation for everybody, but we have to suffer to bring eternity into the lives of others because we are now his body, his hands and his feet. So we keep suffering like he did. We keep serving like he did. Carl Menninger is a psychiatrist, and one of the things he said, not to belittle and not to make light of depression. Depression is a real serious thing, but he said one of the best things that you can do if you're depressed is actually walk outside your house, turn around and lock the door, and go find someone to serve, right? There was a big study done on nurses that are dealing with chronic pain, and they had them be involved in supporting other people with chronic pain, and their rates of pain went down. Isn't that interesting? Yeah. And my grandfather was a great example of that. My granny died, and he started making cookies for people. So he had taken care of her years. She didn't want cancer treatments, and so it was a long process. He was just kind of shut up with her for a long time, and he loved her selflessly until she passed away. And then when she was gone, he started making cookies. And I'm telling you, he would come to we lived not too far from him. We were a young married couple. And he brought us so many Ranger cookies, and he said, just put them in your freezer. And we were just trying to find people to give Ranger cookies to because we could not eat them all. But isn't that beautiful? I heard recently a woman talk about she was taking care of a guy with ALS. And he had lost his ability to eat, and he loved going to restaurants and food. And she said it was so amazing. All the caregivers, we would come, and one of his greatest joys in life was telling us which restaurants to go to and what to eat. And then we would come back and he'd say, did you like it? Was it good? Isn't that beautiful? He could have said, oh, woe is me. My greatest joy in my life is gone. And instead, he poured it into other people. So we make a choice. We make a choice in our lives. And serving is a big part of that choice. So are you a thermometer or a thermostat? A thermometer changes as the environment around it changes. Are you up and down based on the environment around me? Are you a thermostat? Do you control what goes on around you? And do you affect the world around you and regulate the world around you? So remembering who I am and remembering eternity helps me live that culture of joy, which is the heavenly culture. Okay, let's read it together, ladies. We're going to reach out in service. Because I am secure in my identity as a citizen of heaven, I take joy in living the culture of my homeland in my world, thus drawing others to go home with me at the end of my journey. So we're going to live like citizens of heaven, which is pure joy flowing through my life. So this is how you position yourself for God to pour joy into your life no matter what's happening in your world. And we can do that when we understand we are citizens of the kingdom of heaven. Okay? I think it is time for lunch, right? Okay.
Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for your blessings and thank you for this wonderful day. We thank you for everything you give us that's bountiful, that blesses our body and our health. Be with us as we are able to fellowship with everybody in our vicinity and as we take on the food you have provided for us. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Choose joy. Choose the